Hi, foreigner in the Philippines here. One of the things that I've noticed that I've changed on the most since I came to the Philippines is on deciding whether something matters. Now when you're in the West, there's an awful lot of things that matter. Like, it matters whether your library book is due. You get warned on the computer that your library book is due. Your registration has to be on time, otherwise the computer will make a note of that. Your driver's license has to be on time. You need to, if you're going to have any house, you're going to have any work done on your house, you have to have a permit, especially if you're in California. And these things are heavily regulated, and they're regulated, of course, for your safety. And as soon as anything gets regulated for your safety, you lose something. And that is personal choice, personal responsibility for yourself. Whenever you walk across a bridge and it's heavily reinforced so that some person who is at a very low ebb can't throw themselves off and kill themselves and end it all, you are also having your responsibility for your life taken away from you. Now obviously most of you would say, well, that's no bad thing. I want somebody to stop me from killing myself. But perhaps you've missed the point. What I'm trying to say is that it is better to be responsible for your own life and for your own decisions than to have people make them for you. Now, if you go in America, I noticed that because the infrastructure certainly in one of the better neighborhoods, like where I actually lived in Fort Myers, I lived in a fairly well-off area, and the library was almost like a four-star hotel. There were people there who, in wanting to volunteer for something so that they would have something to do with their lives now that they were retired, they would be standing there and they would be only too happy to put that card into the computer for you so that you weren't stumbling around trying to book the library book out yourself. If you needed to know anything, you didn't have to look for the book. You went over and you said, I'd like to find a book on how to find a book, and they would look on it on the computer and they would say aisle 6, F47, and they would tell you exactly where to find it. So then you would go and you look at all the numbers and you'd find the book and you'd be on your way. Now this is wonderful, isn't it? Of course it's wonderful, and no one would want to go back on that. But all the time that things are more and more provided for you, you get a little bit weaker. You get a little bit more helpless. And how do you do that? Well, there is such a thing as learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is the old example of the dog. Now, the people get a puppy that they know is going to grow to a 160-pound Rottweiler, and they know that they're not going to be able to handle that dog if they don't get it trained. So they take a leash, they put a collar on the little puppy. When the little puppy couldn't fight its way out of a paper bag, and they hook it around the bottom of a chair, and the chair maybe weigh 30 or 40 pounds, and the puppy tries to get away and it pulls on the leash and it can't move that chair. Well, of course it can't, because the puppy weighs, say, 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds, and the chair weighs 40 or 50. So the puppy learns that if the leash is put on the table, on the chair leg, they're not going to be able to move. So they lie down and they behave themselves. And as time goes by, they grow and they go 50 pounds, 60 pounds, 70 pounds, 80 pounds, 90 pounds, 100 pounds, 160 pounds, until they could pull that chair all over the house. But they've learned that they can't do that, and it has been fixed into that tiny puppy mind this is something that they can't do. They've learned to be helpless. And so often we learn to be helpless. We learn that we can't do certain things. And the learned helplessness is something which is sometimes all-pervading. And there's an old saying, if you want to take someone's power away from them, just keep doing things for them. That's what happens with, if there's a good secretary, and let's face it, most secretaries have to be pretty well organized, especially if they've got a bit of a clumsy boss who doesn't really think things through, maybe even was promoted for reasons other than his ability. They have to do things for him. And the more that they do, the more that the man depends on them, or woman. And he depends on them. And in depending on them and having them do everything for him, he learns to be helpless. Of course, this is called delegating. So it's not called learned helplessness in that case, it's called delegating. So it's acceptable. But if that secretary decides to go somewhere else and be someone else's secretary, that man can be in real trouble for a little while until he gets someone else who can take over the reins and find out what the hell should be going on. So the learned helplessness is a thing that has to be dealt with. So how are we going to put this to our benefit? Well, first of all, don't allow anyone to do too much for you, because you will learn to be helpless. This is very much a case of, if it's in the, let me say, the digital age where phones are getting more and more complicated, more and more complex. And in my own case, I'm the first to admit that if I get a phone that can do 57 things, wonderful things, it can keep the dates, it can tell me all the birthdays, when I'm supposed to be somewhere, what my height is and what my weight is and what my blood pressure is, and I use it to make a telephone call. That's all. Or sometimes I can do a text, or sometimes I can't do any of that. I use it for, say, Facebook, which in my case is probably true. I use my phone for looking up Facebook and looking up YouTube and seeing how our videos are going. And sometimes if it rings, I don't even know how to answer the phone. Well, this is just between you and I, okay? And I know that you won't tell anybody that I could be so inept. But it's true. So if you're finding that that is happening to you, try to put that right. Many a widow is completely lost, and many a widower is also equally lost because their partner did too much. So don't let people do too much for you. Get out there and do some of it yourself. Okay, those were my thoughts, meandering as they were, about a lot of other different things, but maybe some of it will be of help to you. So this is a foreigner. I wish you good night. God bless. Oh boy, that's a new one for me.